Thank you so much for joining us and being with us today to get an update on here in this Yankton area and in this county on some of the flooding situation that we've been dealing with the last several days. As you know, this has been an extensive event for the state of South Dakota. We now are working with 30 different counties that are facing emergency declaration impacts that could be filed here in order to qualify for FEMA. FEMA disaster relief you all are well familiar with. You've been through this a few times before. We had the flood in 2011 and 2014 and again in 2019 as well. And so this was something that I appreciate you and your emergency management director and the whole team doing a fantastic job getting the community through this situation. And we are grateful that the water is receding. It's receding slowly. You've already crested here, which is good news for everybody. But we've mitigated most of the potential damage that is out there, but also we're still continuing to work with people to deal with flooded areas, flooded roads, and people who are lacking getting access to some of the places that they need to get. But first of all, our projections here are looking a lot better today, which is thankful. Today the James River crested earlier at 22.17 feet, and then that's lower than what we had projected, so that's good news, though it was much earlier than we thought. And originally when this all started back on Thursday and Friday, our concern was with the amount of rainfall that we saw that we would see all three rivers that dump into the Missouri River cresting at the exact same time. And that is one of the reasons why you saw us plan for the worst. We had the Vermilion River, the James, and the Big Sioux at the all same time breaking records as far as what the projections were and how they would impact the Missouri River. We do need to remain vigilant, though, for the rest of this time. You see a lot of water flow coming out of the dam. I know the Lewis and Clark Lake is full, and I was very grateful for the cooperation of the Corps of Engineers and their help with us. Back on Friday, I started talking to them that morning about slowing down some of the flow that we saw coming out of Gavin's Point. And they indicated at that point in time that they could look at being helpful there, although we had so much water coming into the system from the Niobrara that they just weren't able to slow down much of what was coming out of Gavin's, that they couldn't do that because of the rainfall had impacted the whole tri-state area, Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. And so we needed to make sure that we were shutting down Fort Randall above Gavin's and slow down what was coming into Lewis and Clark in order to keep everybody as safe as possible. I'm grateful that the city of Yankton was so prepared to handle whatever situation came, and that the James River crested a little bit later or a little bit lower than what we had thought, and then by it cresting a little bit earlier too, that helped us thread out those pulses that came into the Missouri River, and we'll have a few other speakers address that specifically. I spent the last couple of days kind of in the southeastern part of the state. I think you probably all have seen some of the devastation that we saw down around North Sioux City and the McCook Lake area. That North Shore Drive is completely wiped out, and those families have a real tragic situation on their hand. I know they had to put in place some mitigation efforts and use their levee system and follow their emergency operations plan that involved us building a levee and connecting to the city levees across Interstate 29. And so Interstate 29 was closed for a period of time when we had to build a levee system real quick within a couple of hours. But it did allow us to protect all of North Sioux City and the industrial park that was there. But McCook Lake ended up taking a bigger brunt than what was expected, and we saw some losses. A day and a half ago is when the Big Sioux crested, but the waters there are receding, and then the records that we set throughout all of this, the James River, you guys are the good news. With it cresting at around 22.2, that was 5 feet below the record, so you did not break a record with levels. We're glad that water came down from the northern part of the county a little bit slower than we had anticipated. The Vermilion crested at 32.7 feet, which is 1 foot above the historic record that we have seen. The Big Sioux River crested at 45 feet, and that is 7.3 feet above its historical record. So the Missouri River at Sioux City crested already, and it is receding as well, and that crested at 32.2 feet, which was 3 feet below its record. So had all of the James, the Vermilion, and the Big Sioux crested at the same time, we would have been in a very different situation. So we're grateful that God gave us the gift of making sure that that flow was different in each area, and we didn't all hit the Missouri River at the same time. So the river has remained with about half a foot below its crest, the Missouri River, for about the last 20 hours. It's going down slowly, but we're still glad that it is moving down, and I-29 should be open by now. I think within an hour or two that it's open. So I think that we've got traffic flow back, which is great, because a lot of people were having to reroute through Vermilion and quite a few miles, an hour and a half out of the way in order to get around that levee system. And so it was good to see the Department of Transportation work hard to get that back open. We did have one situation develop yesterday when water that had flowed into McCook Lake flowed in from the east, and it flowed out to the west towards another neighborhood in the northwest of the dunes. So we did see a little bit of damage there, and that neighborhood was evacuated as well. It's just a reminder that these situations change quickly. I remember doing a press conference 2 days ago and made an announcement on water levels, and that it was going to crest at 7 o'clock the next morning, and within a half hour they changed that we were going to actually crest several feet higher, and it was going to be in 3 hours. So I appreciate all of you being flexible in what the National Weather Service can give us for information and how we can do projections. And we've got a chance too to hear from someone that has been extremely helpful with us in our Department of Ag and Natural Resources, and giving us information on how geology affects how this water flows over the ground too, and how absorption levels and all of that impacts what flows and what ends up hitting us at certain times. So outflows from Gavin's Point Dam remain at 24,000 cubic feet per second. So there's no update there. That expects to stay there for quite some time. And I just want to remind everybody to please be safe. We had last night several Game Fish and Parks officers that had to go out and rescue people. We had swift water rescue teams out in several parts of the river, saving people that had driven around barricades, not obeyed the law. They had gone into dangerous areas and they needed to be saved. So I think a lot of people want to go look and they want to go see what's going on, but it's putting them in dangerous situations. And when they do that, it puts those emergency responders in very dangerous situations. So we've had 7, I believe, state agencies that have all been working with and to support our county emergency management directors, and I've been grateful for their help. But the Department of Safety, Public Safety, which I think Bob will speak in a little bit, he's the secretary of that agency, will speak about their role and how we come in as a state and help support. Department of Transportation has been busy flagging people around closed roads and getting up barricades. The Highway Patrol have been out extensively. We've had quite a few agencies that have been out there helping Bureau of Information and Technology get people set up with technology that they need. And I just want everybody to realize that we have an opportunity here to not take risks, to make good decisions, and to keep people safe until this water and the force of this water moving through the river slow down and go back to normal. I do want to take a minute and make sure that we thank all of our first responders. A lot of people are getting tired in the state, and we pulled resources from all across the state to come and help. We've got a lot of law enforcement that came from Sioux Falls and from the western part of the state to come and help block roads and help direct traffic, and I'm grateful for them. And a lot of the emergency responders worked around the clock the last few days to take care of folks and get them what they need and get them back into their homes. And so it's really appreciative of all they've done. So we will have some damaged bridges as well. We will get our DOT engineers out there to look at them and assess that situation. We did lose a railroad bridge over by North Sioux City, and that railroad bridge is the main line for BNSF that takes a lot of commodities, ethanol, aggregates between South Dakota and Iowa. So that's going to affect us for a period of time until we can get that bridge back up and restored. And the one thing I'm grateful for is that after the 2019 flood, and we were talking earlier about the fact that that was when Yankton saw so much damage to your water treatment plant and to so many other things, that but a lot of communities made investments, and the state made a lot of investment in dams and upgrading dams. We spent millions of dollars putting in levees in different communities and building them higher, and that has all helped us during this flood. We still have some vulnerable areas, and we're going to go back and evaluate that and see what we can do to secure that. But this again was an unprecedented amount of rainfall that came in a very short period of time. Many of these communities, I don't know how they could have prepared for what they saw. The city of Canton will probably never see again what they saw in that short amount of time, and they dealt with it as best as they could and got through it together. But boy, they lost a lot of personal property. So I would remind everybody that with those 30 counties that we're working with, we have to have a loss in order to qualify for FEMA of $1.6 million worth of property damage in order to qualify for federal assistance. That will happen. We have far surpassed that. When that happens, 75% of the costs will be covered by the federal government, 15% of the costs will be covered by the state, and then 10% is the local share. And once we assess all these damages and accumulate the costs, which goes through the emergency management directors, they send that into the state. Our Office of Emergency Management accumulates all of that and submits it within 30 days of the event, and then we find out what that reimbursement is and how we can get those dollars to different communities in order to restore the infrastructure that they lost. The one thing I would say is we will request as well individual assistance, which helps personal people in their homes and maybe damage that they had in their home from water rushing through their house or being flooded, and we don't necessarily know if we'll qualify for that. That's a little bit harder to get, but we'll see and submit those applications too to see what we can do to get people the help that they need. So I do want to invite a couple of other speakers up here. First, I want to invite Paul up, who's your Yankton County Emergency Director, and let him share a few words with all of you about the situation, how it is today, and a little bit of maybe the time frame of what they've gone through here in this Emergency Management Center, because they sure have taken a lot of action since Friday to make smart decisions to protect the community and protect the entire county. They got a lot of rain in the northern part of this county, and it impacted everybody downstream, which I'm grateful that they knew what they were doing and that they put the action into the plan into action as soon as possible. So we'll let Paul come on up and
thank you.
Share some words.
Thank you. First, we want to thank the governor and her staff for coming out and seeing us and all the support we've been getting from the state to make this a successful event. Currently, in the Yankton County, we have 14 roads that are still being blocked due to either washouts or water still going over them. We still have the two sandbag stations still up and running, one at the county highway shop, one at Chris Road at 445th Avenue. We now have listed, if you go to yanktonoem.com, that is where you can find for the individual assistance or businesses if you want to start filling out your reports for damages. Also, we've been in contact with all the county townships. We've been working with the highway department for infrastructure, so we'll start doing our public assistance, filling out all the reports to get it sent off to the state. Tomorrow morning, the Yankton County Commissioners will meet at a special meeting to do a state of emergency, and we'll have a declaration for Yankton County tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. That's all, as the governor said, this kind of all started when Friday we got kind of the news that we were going to have some significant rainfall, and we didn't know what was really going to happen, so we activated our Emergency Operations Center to a level 3. And that level 3 is we basically going to monitor. And in that process, we bring in our stakeholders. So we had fire, EMS, the city here in town. We ended up with some of the township folks here, and we talk about what's going on, what they might expect the needs might be. You know, you need sand, you need just all kinds of stuff that we go through. So everybody kind of put together, and then we started developing what they call an incident action plan. And in that plan, it tells us what we're going to be doing for the next day. So we've been working our EOC has been open 24 hours a day. We've been always staffing it around the clock, but people here at the office are here from 8 to 8, so that some people can go home, others are still monitoring. We've been doing that since Thursday morning. So if anybody needs stuff, you know, they can call our office to get more information. But each day we keep continuing talking to our stakeholders, asking what's going on. We call it the Corps has been contacting us. We have a regional coordinator sitting with us in our EOC, getting us information from the state, or if we need something from the state to assist us. And it's just been an ongoing deal every day to make sure that we're able to provide the safety and the needs for the citizens of Yankton County. So with that, that's about all I got to say.
That's perfect. Good. I do want to remind everybody too, he talked a little bit about what county roads and where they're listed and on where they're closed. If you want to find out where state highways are still closed, you go to sd511.org, and that lists all the state highways that are closed as well. So if you have people that are wondering what's been opened and what might not be available to them yet, that's a good resource for you to have, sd511.org. So with that, we're going to go to Secretary Perry with the Department of Public Safety. He has his umbrella of what he covers is all law enforcement, all wildland fire. He also has Office of Emergency Management, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the supporting actions that their office has been taking.
Thank you, Governor. So as the Governor said, we have the Office of Emergency Management within DPS. Our main role in situations like these is to support your local county emergency manager. Your emergency manager had a plan, he put it in action, and that's why, to the extent you can be, you're doing pretty well for the situation you're in. So I think you should all be grateful to Paul for having that plan well established. Not everybody has those. Even sometimes when they have them, they're perfunctory, and that's not what we want. We want to practice, want to train. They do a great job, and that's something we do in the background. We support that. We help them put those plans together. We help with the training. And if the situation gets dire enough, we have something called an IMAT team, an Incident Management Assistant Team. And didn't need to bring it here, but we did send it to Yankton County down in Dakota Dunes. So it was vital. They needed it. And what they do is they support logistically and operationally and help the local county emergency managers coordinate. So that's what we put in place during this event. Like I said, there's a lot of training behind the scenes, and it's great, whether it be EMS or emergency management or the police, that they get out there and practice this, and your team does, and we're grateful that things went as well as they did because of that. One thing I'd like to say in addition is, remember, receding water is still dangerous. You know, when you're going out there to clean up or whatever it is, it's still dangerous. It's muddy, it's mucky. Some of it's still moving pretty quick. Be very careful. It's hot out. Drink some water. When you're cleaning up your yard or your basement or whatever it is, sometimes there's more injury after the fact than during the fact because people are so focused on getting things back to normal. So take your time, be healthy, drink water. I sound like a nurse now, but that's what I have. Thank you.
Well, I think the one thing that's good to remember is there's still a lot of debris in this river, and a lot of debris coming down. So if you see people, the sun is shining and they want to get back out on the river or get back up on the lake, there's a lot of debris coming down. That's been the force of that. And the Niobrara doesn't have a gauge on it. It is an uncontrolled river that dumped a lot of, and really overflooded, dumped a lot of debris into Lewis and Clark Lake too. So I think that's something to be aware of, that you're going to continue to see that. And we see a lot of that down in the southeastern part of the corner of the state, but it's up here too, and so be very careful with that as well. Next, I'm going to go to Tim Cowman, who's with our he's with our Department of Ag and Natural Resources. He's going to speak a little bit about some of his experience on this whole event and how it played out, and some of the geology behind it as well.
Thank you, Governor. I think the governor put the magnitude of this event into a good perspective. You can see how large it actually was. It actually encompassed 5 rivers and a main stem reservoir on the Missouri River. And all of these parts were moving parts that made it very difficult to assess what was going to happen from day to day. But the good news is all of those rivers have now peaked. They're all starting to decline, albeit slowly. But that means that the water levels in essentially every area that's been impacted are receding. I'll speak to the James River first, since it's closest to us here. The James River was the last one to peak. It peaked at about 1 a.m. this morning. But those levels are beginning to decline, and the gauge where we measured the flows is actually about 7 miles north of Highway 50 here, up on the Johnson Bridge. So it takes a while for those peak flows to move through this area and hit the Missouri River. But we should be seeing that by now if they haven't already started moving through. So if the water levels aren't declining yet in the immediate vicinity of southern Yankton County, I would expect that they will be declining within the next few hours. You know, that the whole thing here is all of these rivers are putting a large pulse essentially into the Vermilion River or into the Missouri River, but they're doing their own damage as that pulse moves down each respective river as well. So that's what made this such a large event, with so many people being impacted. The Corps, fortunately didn't have to raise water level discharge out of the Gavins Point Dam, but they weren't really able to drop it as low as we would have liked it, because they had to balance that with what was coming into Lewis and Clark Lake through the Niobrara River. And the levels I've seen now, I know the Niobrara is receding. I know that Lewis and Clark Lake is dropping. So that's all good, that we can rest assured that we're not going to see increased flows out of Gavin's Point Dam. These pulses that the James, the Vermilion are putting in are creating, sort of a synergistic effect when we get further downstream, because you got all those pulses coming together with the flows on the Missouri River and creating big problems for just downstream up here. But with the Big Sioux is finally starting to drop at a fairly good pace, which means the Missouri River down there is also dropping. The pulse from the Vermilion River is actually hitting that area now, but the levels have dropped enough that we don't even expect the Missouri to rise any more than it is right now as that Vermilion River pulse moves through. This pulse from the James River will probably hit that area down there by North Sioux City sometime tomorrow. But again, the water levels will have dropped enough in the Missouri River that we don't expect any type of rise. The only thing that the River Forecast Center is saying is that the rate of decline in the Missouri River may level out a little bit while that pulse moves through, but we won't see any increase in those levels, and that's good. Both the governor and Secretary Perry alluded to these receding waters and the fact that they can still be dangerous, and that's a good point. We have a lot of water sitting out there in basically agricultural land, because this was a huge volume event where we had these huge rains that went all the way basically from the Niobrara Basin in Nebraska up by Mitchell and over to Sioux Falls and dropped huge amounts of rain. So all three of these rivers have put a lot of water into storage out into the agricultural areas, and it's slowly working its way back in, which is why they're probably not receding as much as quickly as you thought they might. I mean, this is not like a sharp V type of graph to the rise and fall. This is really spread out over several days because there's so much water that's coming back into these rivers. So what that means is that those flood waters that moved out onto the floodplain and can be deep in spots and full of dangerous things, they're going to be out there a while. So everyone needs to be aware of that as well. Thank you.
Yes, and I want to remind everybody that if you have personal loss, you should be working with your county emergency director to file that loss and be accumulating that. They'll be doing that on the public side, public infrastructure as well, to see if we can qualify for FEMA relief. Also, we've got a lot of farmers and ranchers out there that have had incredible damage to their land and acreage and crop. I would encourage them to also go out there and to contact their farm service agency, the FSA office, or their crop insurance agent as well. And then if you have personal property loss in your home, make sure you reach out to your insurance agent as well and be doing that. I think most people know that, but it's always good to say that that's the appropriate place to be going in the meantime while you're collecting and gathering and cleaning up from the flooding that we have seen in some of these homes. So with that, let's open it up to any questions that people may have.
Governor, what's the highest concern right now? What area or areas are the highest concern?
Right now for me, it's we got the interstate back open, but the McCook Lake area, the North Shore Drive, that is a very dangerous situation. We have whole homes that have fallen into the lake. We've got 100-foot drop-offs from wash-offs. We've got live power lines that are laying across the roads. We've got boats stuck in trees. We've got trees that are uprooted and half falling over, and people are wanting to get back into their homes and they're not listening to us. They're not staying out of the area. So we're going to have to take some action there. I know people want to go back into their homes and get their things, but that lake is very dangerous. It's filled with debris. The roads are washed out in several places on the way there, and it's not just a washout, it's a 50-foot drop-off. So we're going to have to encourage them and schedule a time they can go get their things out of their homes, but that area is the most dangerous area right now because of the damage that's been done. And those families want their things, and I understand that. But we're going to send extra resources there to keep them out because somebody's going to get hurt. We got through this whole situation with one loss of life that happened. We don't want to lose any more. And we certainly don't want to lose any people from going into a dangerous area that we knew was dangerous. So I think that down there, the Union County folks are tired, and it's been contentious, and it's been hard a situation for them, and they're asking for more resources to keep that area secure. It's not going to be safe for several days. But for us, as far as the water goes, the water situation goes, is for me, now people have been doing this for a few days. Any county road or state highway, if there's water, don't drive through it. If there's a barricade, don't drive around it. You don't know what's underneath it. It could be a 20-foot washout and put yourself in a dangerous situation. We're still doing rescues of people who are driving around barricades that shouldn't be. Other questions? Yes.
Yesterday, the city of Vermillion announced they were having issues with their wastewater treatment because 2 of the 3 outforce, whatever the firm was, weren't working over the river. Is there any update on that at all?
Yeah, a couple days ago, they weren't sure what happened there. They just knew there was sewage going out, but not getting to the pump, the treatment plant. They have found what the issue is. There were 2 lines I think they were able to fix already, and they're working on the 3rd. That was the last update I had. It's been a while, but the system is getting back online.
Other questions?
Governor, speaking of Cook Lake, the berm that was put on the interstate, there's been a lot of talk about that directed all the water to McCook Lake as opposed to somewhere else. Can you kind of go through the logistics of how and why that ended up there?
Yeah, so the emergency operations plan that the North Sioux City has in place, it's been in place for over 30 years, that in this type of a situation that they would utilize their levee system. So the city council had a meeting and had a vote to operationalize their emergency plan that they'd had in place, and that included building up their levees up to the interstate and us building a levee across the interstate to do that. So we did that in 2014 as well, but the water never got high enough that it reached the levee. And they had mitigated before, moving a few houses on North Shore Drive to where water could flow through there without damaging property. The problem was that this water came through so hard and so fast that it just took out, oh gosh, there's a lot of homes. I mean, we're a couple dozen at least homes that are just gone. So that mitigation plan would have worked in a lesser event, but there was so much water that flowed through there. So those people are in a really, really rough situation because they have lost their homes. All of North Sioux City was saved and the industrial park was saved, and that what they did is, the emergency management director there, he put in plan the place that had been there for years in this type of an emergency situation. He operationalized it based on the city council's vote, and that's why it was put up. So, there's some communities in the state that we've been in and that I visited that they didn't have an emergency operations plan, and so now their town is yelling at them because why didn't you have an emergency operations plan? Why weren't you prepared? And North Sioux City was prepared, and people are still upset and angry. So I think everybody needs to remember that when you have a mitigation plan, that doesn't mean there's not going to be any damage. It means you're going to try to make decisions to have as least amount of damage as possible and do the best you can to protect as many people as possible. And I think North Sioux City did the best they could to make the right decision, but the folks on North Shore Drive on McCook Lake, are the ones that are suffering because their homes are gone.
This might be more of a question for Paul, but I know there's that meeting tomorrow morning, but what's the next step here in Yankton County?
Once we get the disaster declaration, it'll be getting all the information from the townships and the county and any organization like an REA that has damages. We need to collect that information and get it to the state within that 30-day period. Because if we don't make it that way, then we don't qualify for it. So that's our next steps, is to start gathering all that information.
And that's another part of the hard part of these types of situations. You have the crisis that goes on for a period of time or a number of days, but then for that 30 days is when Paul's job really, gets busy, because he's going to have to hear from all these townships and collect all the data for his county, get it into us at the Office of Emergency Management so we can submit that documentation in to qualify for those FEMA dollars and those dollars of relief. And then the state steps up and does their part as well, and then the local community and the county knows what they're responsible for as well. Yeah.
I have one more thing, and I kind of forgot about it. We talked about the Emergency Operations Center that was set up. I've got a bunch of folks sitting on the wall on the other side over there. It isn't just me. I won't mention their names because one of them will probably get beat up on, but they're the backbone behind it. It isn't just me. We've got 5 other people sitting next door making the IAPs, getting the weather stuff, putting together PA stuff. So I got to give the big hands out to them also. Otherwise, I probably shouldn't go back to that side of the room.
The one thing, Jerry, you asked a little bit about McCook Lake, and I do want to have Tim come back up and talk a little bit about the fact that McCook Lake would have flooded anyways, and the water came in exactly where we thought it was going to come in, but why it was a little bit of a different situation than what they had planned on.
When the flood of 2014 happened down through that area on the Big Sioux and Missouri, after that flood, as a way to be better prepared for future floods, we had a hydrologic model built of essentially that river and the Missouri River so that we could predict what was going to happen in future floods. When the 2019 flood went through there, which was also pretty major, that model was spot on with its predictions. So that model was used in this flood as well, and as we're seeing now what the result of that flood was, how high it was, how far it spread out, we can see that the model again was spot on with this flood. So in that model, when we look at the flooding in the McCook Lake area with or without the berm, we find essentially no difference. In other words, it doesn't matter if the berm was there or not, that water would have gone over into the McCook Lake area and flooded it. So the benefit here was that we also know from that model that if the berm was not there, like the governor said, that industrial park section of North Sioux City, as well as residential sections further south of the industrial park, they would have also seen a lot of water.
Yeah, we learn with every flood that happens, and that's one thing that we have been dealing with ever since the 2011 flood that was so devastating to the state of South Dakota, and then the 2014, putting in that model was incredibly helpful to us when we got to 2019 and we had that bomb cyclone that hit the state. Since 2019, we have been, as a state, investing heavily in repairing and rebuilding dams and levee systems. Sioux Falls did a lot of work building up levee systems and working to do that. That helped them incredibly through this situation, the Big Sioux going through there. And so I'm glad that with every single one of these floods, we have literally spent millions of dollars making sure that our dams are fixed, that our dams are rebuilt, and that they're to standard and that they will hold with this kind of pressure, and that our levee systems are raised to the levels that we think that we need them to be. So that's been good, and that helped us a lot in this. I know that we were better prepared for this situation than our surrounding states. They have a lot more damage because of not having that kind of an investment, so this was helpful to do that. But you know, we always do see some loss, and that's always a hard thing to get through. But I will tell you, throughout this situation, talking to the Army Corps of Engineers and them giving me predictions, and then the National Weather Service giving us predictions, and then I would call Tim. Tim was always right. So I would, the National Weather Service, I mean, I gotta love them because they're there and they're a resource. But if I had to pick one that I was gonna listen to, it's gonna be Tim and his model, and he always gave me the most accurate information, and what they built in that system was the most predictable thing for us to use, and I was extremely grateful for it, because there was times I was getting information from the Army Corps and from the National Weather Service that just an hour later would be 5 feet off and cresting 12 hours earlier than they had told me a half hour before, and that's pretty hard to plan and prepare and get people ready for and keep them calm and ready to go to work. So his models are fantastic, and I think that was a great resource for us to build into, to have. So, waiting other questions? Yes, sir.
I don't think the National Guard has been employed yet.
Nope.
Is there a threshold where they might be coming in for cleanup or something? Or
Well, in order for the National Guard to be activated, the county has to request it, and then I make a decision if it's warranted, and if we should do that. We have not had to utilize the National Guard for this operation yet. That's usually typically a very crisis situation, and the National Guard is extremely expensive. So if you do activate the National Guard, then the local county has to pay for that response, and they tend to be more expensive than using other resources or contractors or things like that. So that has not been necessary up until this point, and I don't expect that we'll have to. And I gotta tell you, we activate our National Guard, I mean, they get utilized a lot. If they've been deployed federally overseas a lot and throughout lots of situations, you know, we have to be wise with how we use our soldiers. And this was a situation where every community was pretty well prepared, and that wasn't necessary to activate them at this time. All right, well, thank you very much.